the podcast that finishes your workday in a very Red Raider way. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
It's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Mike Gustafson and Clint Scott. I'm Aaron Dickens. We're joining you today from the First United Bank Double T 97.3 studio. With you until 6 o'clock. We'll have coverage of the Red Raider basketball team as they take on Louisiana Tech tonight. Again, our coverage starts at 6, tip-off at 7. Some tech-on-tech action tonight there at the USA High School Fan Zone at 7 on 100.7 The Score, following the Cowboys Hour at 6. Gus, how you going? Good weekend?
Yeah, shoot, yeah. I had a blast on Saturday. Another fun day of tailgates and concerts. And
how was Gin Blossoms?
it was fun. It was an older crowd. I thought it was a big crowd again, but I think the and their lead singer he said something like, he made some reference to the fact that all of your grandchildren attend this university. It was like, hey, not quite just children, not yet grandchildren, but the crowd was very much my age. I wouldn't say my age, but
the Aaron Gus window.
Yeah, there were some college kids that were around for the Tone Loc deal last week going, oh yeah, it's Funky Cole Medina. I know that song. This week it was heavy. It was good crowd, another good crowd, and but it was heavy. Maybe the oldest leaning crowd of all the ones that I've been to. Like this time, I was able to get from me to Clint. Oh,
nice.
Yeah, there was no mosh pit. But were there to be a mosh pit, I would have either had to engage or take a step back because I was.
You can't really half-ass a mosh pit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You can't really sort of sit on the fringe.
Yeah.
You're
either like you're committed or you're just out.
And you have to be really careful if you're going to be the one who starts it, right? Because if you're the first guy who tries it,
that's a leap of faith, man.
All of a sudden you're just the jerk who's pushing people around.
Right?
Like,
Yeah.
Like, what are you
drunkard out of here?
That's funny. Yeah, there was a couple of mosh pits that broke out at Nightmare, where you could kind of see the thing, and that was a smaller crowd, but leaned heavy young, and they moshed a little bit, if that's the word. I assume you don't have to lose teeth and have draw blood to call it a mosh pit, but they had kids bouncing around up there. But anyway, that was a fun day and a good concert and good win and some.
It was a huge win.
Yeah, chilly conditions and just fun night the whole way around. That was another good day. And props again to Gio and his crew and for all the things, all the little toys we've been given this year.
This is the Yates Flooring Center chat line from T-Money 806. Gus, he was a little salty with his comments. One about they never said Gin Blossoms would go anywhere, but look at them now. They made it all the way to Lubbock, Texas. That's when I left.
Oh, he said that, but I didn't take it personally. He said they were going to get some Mexican food, good Mexican food, and he said we'll probably be there for the next 4 hours. I didn't have my feelings on my toes on that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's understood, right? That if you're in that book, that tech officials can kind of flip through, and we want this band, this act to come perform for us before the game. You're not at your peak, right? I think that's understood by everybody, but still, Gin Blossom's hella cool that they were able to come here, and
I agree.
If they're a little bit salty or whatever, I don't care.
I thought they had fun on stage, fun with each other. I didn't think they were going through the motions at all. So it was, it was good. And then a really good result on the field, which we got plenty of time to talk about. But got hoops tonight. I mean, it's good. We're rolling, right?
I feel like if you look back at this game 5 years from now, and you win by 15 points, you never trail, all these kind of good things in the box score, it didn't really seem as easy as we'll probably think it was or recall it being 5 years from now, right? I mean, they claw back from an early deficit. And I think part of it, Gus, at least from my perspective, was, I mean, you were up 24-7 at one point, and then they were driving down the field to either take a lead or tie the game going into the half. And thanks to an amazing sequence interception and field goal, you recapture momentum going into halftime. But the Jayhawks' ability to pop big plays at seemingly any moment, it really made it feel like no lead was safe. And Ryan Leaf was talking on the broadcast, the TV broadcast, about 10 minutes to go in the fourth. Tech had just scored. I think at this point it was 33-21, and that's exactly what it was. And he's like, oh well, kind of run the ball. It's coming off the table now. You're down 2 scores, fourth quarter. You got to really lean into the pass game. And it's like, have you been watching this game? Have you, Devin Neal? Have you met Devin Neal?
Right. That's a whiff. I mean, you could just tell by what Kansas has been this year, just well coached and competitive, the whole deal. And I mean, they 200 of their yards came on 4 plays, and we talked about the other day, and I know Chuck and I even talked about it on Saturday at the K-State game.
Yeah, Sunflower State.
Yeah, 3 plays and 100 and I don't know what it was, 180, 190 yards and 3 plays there. And so, good play design, and maybe that points to, a problem or a shortcoming of this defensive group. But I'll say this for this Tech defense, they made some plays at key times, dropped an interception that would have been big, got a break on a couple of missed field goals. But, and to carry it out, I think the first possession of the second half for Kansas, they go 7 minutes, drive all the way down and clang their second field goal off the pole, and for the second time in the day. And that was another point that it felt like, that could have been a 7-minute drive and 7 points, or even 3 points, and it's like, momentum lost, and 2 possessions in a row that really worked the Red Raiders' way, and we were due for that sort of thing. So I'm not apologizing.
I wonder how many kickers have come through that stadium and doinked it off both uprights in the same game.
That's hard to do.
Like both sets of uprights.
Yeah, both ends. I mean, it really is. Well, this time last week, I think where were we that it was on the TV or something? Because I thought you and I talked about on this day, whatever, how many years ago was the day that the Chicago Bears kicker hit the upright 4 times in one game.
Mm-hmm.
And he went over 4. Like, you don't just miss the field goal, make it uber dramatic. And I thought about that when their dude misses 2, and both of them clang the upright.
Lots more to get to on Tech Talk. More next.
It's every Red Raiders' favorite podcast. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, it's the Juice on Double T 97.3, brought to you by our friends at Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods. Time for a quick look at today's biggest sports headlines. The 23rd ranked Texas Tech Red Raider basketball team will be in action tonight, taking on Louisiana Tech. Red Raiders moved up 2 spots in this week's AP Top 25 after beginning the season with a pair of victories. Red Raiders have now won 23 consecutive home games, contests, matches. Tip-off tonight against La Tech, 7 o'clock. Our pregame coverage will start for you at 6 on Double T 97.3. Texas Tech senior kicker Trey Wolf was recognized today by the Big 12 as the conference's co-special teams player of the week. It's Wolf's second honor from the Big 12 this year. He was a perfect 3 of 3 on field goals on Saturday. He split the uprights from 30, 33, and 51 yards, marking the 5th time in his career that he successfully connected on 3 field goals in a game. The regular season finale for the Texas Tech football team has been slotted for a 6:30 p.m. kickoff against Oklahoma. That is on Saturday, November 26th. Contest will be broadcast on FS1. First time since 2007 that these 2 teams will have closed the regular season against each other. Tech looking to snap a streak of 10 consecutive losses to the Sooners. Have not topped Oklahoma since beating them in Norman in 2011. You too can join the program. We'd love to hear from you. Hit us up on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at doublet973.com or through the Double T 97.3 mobile app presented by Happy State Bank. Bobby Hot Dog says, I thought the concert was great too. I also thought it was funny when he spoke about the accolades of their first album. He then said, and we've been milking that success since 1992. At least they're honest with how they stand in the musical world. Someone else says, he was joking around and not taking himself too seriously. It was a fun show.
Agree.
We talked about, I don't know if this was Thursday or Friday, Gus, but we talked about how good Kansas had been in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
They were one of the best in the conference. They had more red zone attempts than anyone in the league. They had more red zone scores than anyone in the league. I think prior to Saturday, they had only gone to the red zone 4 times and come up empty. And you held them scoreless twice. They were 3 of 5 inside the 20. And while, it's easy to kind of call that the difference in the game, it certainly kind of shades or helps maybe put a better light on the defensive performance. Because if you look at you give a ton of yards, and 28 points is nothing amazing. It's about your average, but you stiffened when you needed to against a very good KU offense.
I mean, there's no argument there. I mean, no conversation. And on a night where it felt like turnovers were critical. It felt like there was offensive success to be had for the Red Raiders as long as they didn't turn it over, and they didn't. And we got, for lack of a better term, we got the Tyler Shough we've been hearing about. I mean, it would be hard to really find a lot of shortcomings. I'm not saying he was perfect the other night, but that was the guy that we had been told about, and I was impressed. Kitley talked about him doing a good job of keeping his eyes up the field. Check 1, check 2, check 3. It's not there. Going and making a play with his legs. There was a couple of called running plays, which was courageous and good on him. If there was a point at which he was gun shy or whatever a couple weeks ago, would have been understandable. I would think that's out the door, and maybe that was the benefit of him getting extended time against TCU, but it felt like the rust was off. He was pretty accurate with the throws. The thing that those guys talked about immediately in the post game was him checking into some good plays, and perhaps some of the successful run calls were plays that he checked into. I know specifically that McGuire talked about the final touchdown where Tech's going down and trying to run clock, and at worst they're going to kick a short field goal and go up 8, and 3rd and goal from the 5.
Brooks.
Yeah, they send a corner blitz. Check. Brooks takes the hand off and immediately
jump cut.
Yeah, jumps that guy and then kind of walks into the end zone. They said that was all Shough getting them out of the pass play that was called and into the right running play. And I'm not saying that we haven't had that this year, but I think it's what they've talked about Shough doing the best. It's what we and why he's won that job 2 years in a row. And I think it was Shough's finest hour, with the possible exception of maybe the second half down at Houston last year. Before we really, that was his first game. We didn't, played a great second half down there, and then the injury, and so we really didn't have much perspective on it. But now, what he did the other day, I mean, I think he walks out of that. I hope he got a game ball, because I thought he was the difference.
I mean, really, it's hard to find much fault at all with anything offensive. I thought the O-line played pretty good, granted, against the Kansas defense that has given up some yards and points this season. Shough, you just went over. He was very, very good. And I think especially, too, how he affected that game on the ground, right? I think is perhaps the biggest takeaway for me, because at that point, I mean, if you've got Tyler Shough running for 76 yards and picking up, 5+ first downs with his feet, what are you doing bringing Donovan Smith in for? Like, and it seemed like you went away from that. I think that happened maybe twice in that game.
Yeah, he scored a touchdown early, and then they ran another pop pass thing that they tried earlier, and then that was kind of it.
And, right, because I mean, if Shough can get you those, he's a big kid. I mean, he's
6'4".
He's not some. This isn't Todd Reesing we're talking about. And then you had some big plays out of the receivers. Not a lot of run after catch. Not a lot of run after contact, but 43 points in the Big 12.
You
Take
bet.
that every time.
You bet.
More Tech Talk next.
The podcast put together with Red Raider fans in mind. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
So Texas Tech beat Kansas on Saturday, 43-28. The Red Raiders now 5-5 overall, 3-4 in conference play. Still on the table, a 7-5 regular season, which means still on the table, the Red Raiders' first winning Big 12 record since 2009.
Yep.
In order to get there, you got to win this weekend in Ames. Going to be chilly if you're there. I won't be. But you realize, do you recall the last time that Texas Tech won back-to-back Big 12 games?
Good grief. Was it? Well, it wasn't last year.
It was not last year.
No.
Last year, the closest you got to back-to-back Big 12 wins was winning 2 of 3. You won in Morgantown, lost to TCU, and then won in Lawrence.
Okay.
Was the Kansas State game after the one in Lawrence?
The K-State game that you lost at home?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was after Lawrence, yes.
So it was like that
directly.
close.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, true. Yeah, I mean, you were a gag job away from winning back-to-back Big 12 games.
Well, I guess it's the last time that they would have gone 5-4 would be 13.
They've never gone 5-4 because in 2009 it was an 8-game. The last time that this program
5-3
won back-to-back Big 12 games, Cliff Kingsbury was the head coach. 2018.
Wow.
You win at TCU 17-14, and that was a Thursday game, and then you win against Kansas 48-16. It has been a long-ass time, Gus, since you. I mean, that's not really asking a whole lot, right?
No, that's not.
Just to win 2 games in a row in conference play, and yet this program hasn't done it.
In a minute. Yeah.
In a good while. And heck, those were your last 2 Big 12 wins. You lost 5 straight in that season. So whew, let's get her done. You're about a 3-point underdog last I checked.
Yep, that's what I thought. Yep. I think now's a good time as ever. I mean and I guess you could tell me you're probably in the right spot to answer the when was the last time Tech won 3 in a row question, or do you want to put that one in the chamber for next week?
I don't know that you've done that in the current Big 12 configuration. I mean, because even as you kind of scroll past, I mean, 2015 you had a pair of 2-game Big 12 winning streaks, but you know what? It might have been 2013 actually. Let's see. Yeah, because it was 2013. You won in Lawrence. You beat Iowa State. You won in Morgantown. Yeah.
So
you were actually 4-0 in the Big 12 at that point, but the TCU game was kind of placed in the middle of your non-conference schedule, so it wasn't. You didn't win. Yeah.
So are there any streaks that don't involve Kansas?
Let's see.
I mean, think about what you just said. Yeah, and West Virginia.
Yeah, right. So it's going to be tough this weekend. I mean,
if
would you think is 20 points going to be enough?
Well, I'd take it because you asked me that question last week. If you could have 21 points, would you take it? And the answer is yeah. And I think you know, one of the things you and I touched on, of course, we were in the getting way ahead of ourselves category, but and it was just looking at the iPhone weather forecast for Ames, which I think you and I were doing that in here. So Wednesday at the latest. I think when it first popped up on the 10-day, and the forecast has gotten a little bit colder from there. But and it's a night game and an evening kick. But the thing you and I kicked around as being perhaps helpful in that regard is the fact that Tech practices in the morning, and you got high temperatures in the 40s here all week. And so tomorrow morning, that'll be as close as they'll get to simulating that, right? And Coach McGuire addressed it head on today. I mean, it wasn't the first thing out of his mouth, but it was in the first 5 minutes when he talked about. He said, I don't believe in the not talking about it and walking around in short sleeves, you know, the old Bud Grant school.
Right.
You know, Bud Grant was
here to win a football game, not prove something.
Right. And Bud Grant was, just in fairness, he was an old stoic, either upper Midwestern Minnesota guy who had coached in Canada as well. And so Bud Grant probably wasn't bothered by 20 degrees. Might have been a heat wave for him, but all those outdoor games in the 60s and 70s that they played in Minnesota. But, yeah, and then, you know, Coach McGuire talked about it head on. He said, we're going to deal with it and address it and devote time and attention to it. And like I said, the best thing they've got going for them is practice tomorrow morning, because if there's a breeze like we've got out there today, you can simulate some cold weather out there right now. I mean, it feels cold. Fortunately, for our sake that we're in the stadium this past Saturday night, it wasn't that windy. It wasn't a breeze, you know, it wasn't that kind of, you know, it was plenty cold, but we didn't have that cutting wind that we've got out there right now. But they're going to be able to get a look tomorrow. That'll help.
And Iowa State's going to be playing it too.
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, it's going to be, and actually,
and it'll be cold for them too.
It might end up being a positive thing for Texas Tech, right? Because on the one hand, you have an Iowa State football team that is 4-6. They're 1-6 in the Big 12. This is, you know, if this was 10 years ago, this would have been a pretty good season for the Cyclones. But based on their last 4 or 5 years, this is a massive disappointment.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be it's a night game. It's going to be extremely cold. I don't care if you're from Canada or from, you know, Florida. It's going to be cold. And you know, how motivated are they going to be to show up for that game, right? There's also apparently like an all-state musical festival being held at the Coliseum, Hilton Coliseum, that night too. So traffic and parking might be a bit of a cluster.
Oh.
So
it's a shame.
You know, we might sit here on Monday going, yeah, that crowd, just because normally they'll pack it in.
Sure.
Like normally they'll show up. Usually have a very good crowd. That's a tough place to play, but hopefully they stay home and decide to keep warm.
Mail it in
just for safety, you know.
Yeah, sure. Safety first. But I'm intrigued by it, and fortunately our guys will get a little bit of a look tomorrow morning and be able to just get after it. And I think the real attention is dealing with the cold, and I don't want to dismiss linemen button heads and that stuff all day long, but I think it's the guys handling the ball, you know, quarterbacks, kicker, you know, I mean, the punter, deep snapper, holder, all that kind of stuff. Those dudes that, you know, they've got to be able to cope with that, and to be able to simulate it tomorrow will help. And you know, and then there's a toughness level that comes with it, and I would say that you know, Coach McGuire's probably instilled some of that in our guys. You know, the things that he has in his brand, I think we've seen those play out, and this will be a week where the toughness part of the brand's going to play out, because it's there will be a mental
Oh,
toughness
sure.
aspect to this, no doubt.
More tech talk next.
The podcast that finishes your workday in a very Red Raider way. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hello there. It's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Clint and Gus. I'm Aaron. Would love to hear your thoughts and comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at Double T 97.3.com. This is the chat line. What happened to our signing class? Everyone was excited that we had a top 10 class. Now it's ranked 49th. Is that correct? I have not scoped out the team rankings in a hot minute, but currently Rivals.com, Texas Tech has the 18th ranked recruiting class in the country. And if you look just at the Big 12, the Red Raiders have the league's 4th best recruiting class. If you sort that based on average star ranking of your signees, essentially you are tied with Baylor for 4th in that specific category. And Gus, I mean, this is something that I think that if you've been listening to the show, we've talked all along about how great it was that at one point you had the number 1 class in the country.
Right.
But that was always based on, at the time, the number of commitments that you had, which was unusually high compared to the other programs in the country. You had quality there, too. Don't get it twisted. It wasn't just 22 stars. But you had 15, 16, 17 commits, while most other programs only had 8 to 9. And so you racked up some points. It's like running a race, and you're leading at the midway point, but you know you don't have enough left in the tank to hold off everybody and finish the race number 1. That's what's happened. Nothing bad has happened to your class. It's still the same great class that you were really excited about in April and May and June. It's just that everyone else has begun to add commits too, and so that, they've picked up points, so to speak.
And I think one of the things that I had seen at the time, reflecting exactly what you're saying, and this is very much your department, not mine, but something to the effect of the average star rating of that class, even when it was ranked number 3 or whatever, as you were talking about, was going to place it in the mid to high 20s. Where just based on where that average star rating would typically have it. Now, understand this: that's way different than 49th, though. So, to the texter's point,
sure.
I don't
maybe
know.
they were looking at 24/7. I don't know.
Good point. Hopefully, from what my understanding is, that class is going to end up in the mid to high 20s, and that's a pretty good spot for it. Definitely better than we've been in.
No, you've been
years.
50s, 60s,
right?
Maybe a peak into the 40s here and there. And I mean, like, we can have this conversation too. You're going to sign the best class maybe in your history. There's really only 1 or 2 others that have kind of come close to this territory, at least in terms of like the Rivals era. Now, maybe in the 70s you signed a more heralded, more contested class, but the documentation that goes back 50 years ago is not great when it comes to recruiting. But so massive improvement, massive upgrade. You just, there's no way to microwave it and fast forward 3 years, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think this is as good a time as ever, and it's. I know it's something that we have addressed. I know I specifically, because I remember going through and marking this, that so much of the defensive back, I won't call it depth, but just the key performers in our defensive backfield, the vast majority of them transferred here as portal guys. Now, they came here with 2 and 3 years left in many cases, maybe even 4. And so that we've been able to watch that group mesh and come together and play better and mature and get bigger and stronger. And so some of those, the Muddy Waters and some of those dudes are playing out a pretty nice stretch here, but they were brought in. And again, this is your department, but as I think back on it, they were brought in at a time when what was left over, especially defensively from the Kingsbury era, forced Wells and those guys to go comb the waiver wire, and they brought in a bunch of DBs and had to deal with it. In addition to Tyree Wilson, which that's like its own category, but that's another Wells find. And right now, I think we're benefiting from it, and by no means is this the defense that Coach McGuire wants it to be eventually, but we're benefiting, especially in the defensive backfield, from a bunch of portal transfers that have matured and come together over the years.
Yeah, because a decade ago, and Tech has done this maybe 4 times, 3 or 4 times over the last 20 years, where you, due to roster mismanagement, departures, busts, misses, whatever, you found yourself in a kind of an oblique situation to where, hey, we don't have really anybody that we like at this position or on this side of the ball. And so in the past, the recipe for maybe fixing that quickly is to go JUCO.
Yeah.
Sign a bunch of junior college prospects. And you did that in, I want to say, 2011, and I think you did that in 2014. And it helps sometimes, but also it can come back and bite you too, because there's no, it's empty calories, because they're here and then they're gone. The portal helps because you can get, as you mentioned, players that can have 3 years, maybe 4 years of eligibility left. And so now that's the new kind of quick fix. And so it'll be interesting to see what McGuire and his staff do here, because there's no longer that initial limit where you can only have an initial limit of 25 scholarships. You're only governed by the 85 total, which is why one of the reasons why, and people don't really kind of get this, one of the reasons why Leipold has been so successful at Kansas.
Got their numbers up, yeah.
Right, because they've been stuck in this cycle of crap where no matter how many prospects they signed, you just couldn't keep up. You were barely treading water because you could only bring in 25 at a time, and you were already below 60 scholarships.
Yeah,
and so you'd constantly be facing off against teams that just had more raw players than you did. And with this rule change, Leipold can go in and say, you know what? Okay, here's 30 new players or whatever it was. I don't really know the details there. And so suddenly they had a full football program.
They had 15 transfers come in this year.
Yeah,
sure, and they've been able to fill a depth chart. I'm curious, and this is whether this is something we can talk about today or next spring. I've always thought that in the wake of the 2008 season, that next recruiting class never really panned out to being what it could have been.
More Tech Talk next.
It's every Red Raiders' favorite podcast. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, it's the Juice on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Gus and Clint. I'm Aaron. Time for some headlines brought to you by our friends at Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods. The Tech basketball team has jumped 2 spots to number 23 in this week's AP Top 25 after opening the season with a pair of wins last week. The Red Raiders back in action tonight against Louisiana Tech. Tip-off at the USA, 7 o'clock. Our pregame coverage begins for you at 6 here on Double T 97.3. Tech kicker Trey Wolff named Big 12 Coast Special Teams Player of the Week today after he went 3 for 3 on field goal attempts in the Red Raiders win over Kansas on Saturday. He split the uprights from 30, 33, and 51 yards. 5th time in his career that he has connected on 3 field goals in a game. And the Big 12 announced today a 6:30 p.m. kickoff for the Red Raiders' regular season finale against Oklahoma on Saturday, November 26th. The contest will be broadcast on FS1. And finally, West Virginia has agreed to separate with athletic director Shane Lyons, who's been at the school since 2015. Probably not great news for Neil Brown. You too can join the program. Would love to hear from you on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at doublet973.com. Although the timing, Gus, is interesting.
I wondered if the timing might help Neil get one more year, because they're going to be embroiled in or engaged, I guess, in an AD search, and not because this wasn't an announced, hey, on December 1st, I'm leaving with 3 months to get ready for it. Yeah. And they're doing an interim and the whole deal. And so is the interim going to hire a new football coach, or are they going to let Neil ride it out? Because part of their complaint, at least, or their rationale for getting rid of Lyons, is that he didn't aggressively seek enough revenue streams, which, may be an acknowledgement of money's not great right now. In our first act, we're going to stroke a $20 million check to the guy, which, seems like to me, I would think he'll be back.
From what I have read about Lyons, he's on, I don't know what committee. He's on some influential NCAA committee.
NCAA Transformation Committee.
Okay, yeah.
But he's been on several others.
Yeah, he's been really, really high profile for the Mountaineers, kind of like Kirby in that way for Tech. Mm-hmm. Like, his name is out there. And so I think that there was some frustration, whether this is deserved or, reasonable or not. He apparently flirted with Nebraska a little bit when that AD spot came open last year,
which is where his roots are, if I remember correctly. I think
possibly. He's been a minute here.
Yeah, I thought he came here around. He overlapped here with Urias,
mm-hmm.
and I
who's
think
now at West Virginia.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But I think he was compliance here. Maybe Jennifer Brashear worked under Lyons. Is that correct?
I don't know.
But yeah, she's been the head of compliance here for 17 years.
He had flirted with that Nebraska job, and then also pursued to some degree the Big 12 commissioner job. And so I think that that kind of frustrated some Mountaineer people, and then the fact that the football program is not performing. But I think you're right, because like there's a Nebraska route here and an Auburn route, right? Auburn replaced their AD, and the morning that the new AD was introduced, they bleep canned Brian Harsin, right? Or Nebraska, right? They hired Trev Alberts last summer, 2021, and he evaluates Scott Frost and finds him wanting, and then makes a move, and then now is going to get to hire his own guy. I tend to think this will be more Nebraska than Auburn.
Mm-hmm. I would think so.
Because what's the quickest, realistically, you think they could get a new AD in? A month?
I mean, yeah,
a month and a half?
Unless it's an internal hire with this dude that, that they just anoint him. I would imagine. I don't remember.
It's not a quick process.
No, I would imagine and I don't remember the timing on it. In a matter of months, weeks to months, like we're talking about. But Coach Myers was an assistant here on the staff under Bachrath, and Bachrath left for Alabama, and Coach Myers was hired. Now I don't know if that was from Monday to Thursday or if it was 3 months later after a series of interviews. I don't recall, but that an internal candidate would be the one that could probably be sped along.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I assume this is not Oliver Luck. Is he beyond the athletic director spot there?
Oh no, I think I've seen his name pop up a couple of different times. Former Mountaineer AD already, and I've seen his name pop up a little bit as well, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a woman that works at LSU. Kelly something, I think, that spent some time at West Virginia, who's a candidate, apparently a target. Whit Babcock at Va Tech is a target. And Rob Mullen at Oregon, I think, went to West Virginia.
Oh.
He might be someone that they pursue, although that seems kind of like a pipe dream, but who knows? We'll see. But to me, it seems like you're going into a year, Neil Brown, as a lame duck.
Sure.
Going to affect recruiting. You've already seen a number of portal announcements for Mountaineers. And the crummy thing is, they just beat Oklahoma.
I know.
Like for the first time ever. For the first time ever, the West Virginia Mountaineers beat Oklahoma at home. And, the axe falls a couple of days later.
Yeah, and we got to watch that game, or to the very end of it, and we're keeping an eye on it. And at some point realized, man, it's raining there. I mean, it was just kind of a drizzly, dreary, crappy-looking day. And but they were hanging in. And then I turned around and like, hey, they got it down on the 12-yard line and then it was just a matter of them like getting through all of OU's timeouts and how much time can they run off the clock, and they were able to play. They actually crashed it ahead for a couple first downs, and it's like they're gonna be able to call timeout with 4 seconds left and kick a 20-something yard field goal to win it, and they did. And so
well, that was a bit more pucker factor than normal because the holder was a backup.
Oh, I didn't realize
backup holder. And if you weren't able to watch the beginning of that game, the Mountaineers scored.
Oh, that's right, the extra
at the
point
end of the first half,
yes,
and fumbled the snap on the extra point, which Oklahoma returned for a 2-point conversion. Backup holder. And so that was going through my mind there at the end of that sequence, at the end of the game. But they got it down and kicked through the uprights. And man, what a massive disappointment for Oklahoma.
Yeah, and West Virginia's got, they've had a couple of, their best moments have come at home, which is not that's a big,
sure.
They'll be competitive and plucky at home, and then go on the road and not be very good. But yeah, I forgot about that because actually Chuck and I were still in the air right before you and Chris came in there, but because it was a 10-0 game, and West Virginia scores a touchdown right before the half. We go, okay, 10-7, got a little jump in their step, and they dump that snap and jack around with it, and it basically becomes a scoop and score. So it's that proverbial 3-point swing, and so it's 12-6 going in a half.
I've got one more big thing about that West Virginia AD search next on Double T 97.3.
Podcast put together with Red Raider fans in mind. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
I did make cheese weenies over the weekend. Delicious as always. I intended to bring some with me for you two gentlemen to try, but Bonus Kid finished off the batch. So I was quite proud.
Pretty sure this is the second time that this has been told, at least whenever I've been involved.
Because I was like, hey, I'm going to go put the cheese weenies up. And he goes, hey, I was actually going to get seconds. And I had to, fight back tears. I was so proud. All right, so back to Shane Lyons, West Virginia, and that AD vacancy. What's the most consequential decision that next AD will make, Gus?
Well, I would imagine that football hire, right?
In most situations, you would be correct.
Well, Huggins is about to retire. Oh, well, I shouldn't say that, but I would imagine he's nearing the end.
That is going to be the most consequential decision that this next AD in Morgantown makes. It might not be the one that generates the most revenue, right? But you'll be replacing a legend.
Yep. A Naismith
Hall of Famer.
Yeah, a Naismith Hall of Famer. So not just the College Basketball Hall of Fame, but like the Basketball Hall of Fame, and a native son.
Right.
And that's a big deal. Like
that will have to be handled in a pretty delicate way.
Yep.
You can't really force him out, right? However he exits, it needs to be on good terms. And so if you're the administration, the powers that be at West Virginia, you have these two big decisions looming, right? Football coach and then Huggy Bear. And if you don't think Shane Lyons is the guy to handle that, then that's why you axe him, right? To say nothing of, revenue opportunities or whatever.
Sure.
So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that's all handled, because there will be a lot of attention on, Neil Brown and what you do with him, but don't lose sight of the basketball deal, because that's supremely important as well.
I would have told you a couple years ago that if Huggins had been gone a year ago, I wouldn't have been surprised. At the point at which, he started showing up on the sidelines on the little stool thing, and
right,
like, okay, he's got to be, and they had a dip. They had a year where it was kind of a mess, and I thought, I wonder if this is the point at which he's, just the NIL crap, and just kind of crabby old guy, right? A little bit of what we saw in TCU last year. With Coach Patterson, near the end, just these, kids these days, that kind of thing.
Well, they missed the postseason last year,
right? And
they haven't been past the first weekend in the tournament since 2018. It's just not. It's trending down,
right? And it feels like, and I give him credit, because I think his teams have been competitive over the last few years, where they've been piecing together rosters. Go out and get a couple transfers, and they play tough as nails, and they all seem to take on his personality. And in some respects, it feels like the last 2 or 3 years of Bob Knight's tenure here, where you can still see his stamp on this team, and they're still competitive and getting after it and not embarrassing themselves or whatever. But this isn't peak. It's nearing the end, and we can all acknowledge it. What you're saying is exactly correct, and it becomes the Paterno. Take the scandal stuff out, but it becomes the Paterno, Bobby Bowden, Gene Stevenson to a lesser extent, at the longtime baseball coach at Wichita State, but where the performances slid off the hill, and then the camps divide, and one camp is, he ought to be able to coach there until he darn well says he's, after all that he's done for this program, which is exactly what we could say about Stevenson, Paterno, Bowden. Sure. On the other hand, it's like somebody's got to make the tough decision to fire him, because it's nowhere near his peak, and you can see the recruiting's dipped off, and older coach hanging on too long, whatever. The very, very, very end of Rice, Wayne Graham at Rice was the same way. You got an 80-year-old head coach. You think that's not being used against you in recruiting? I mean, no way. And we're not talking about that with Huggins, but
we talk frequently about how, hey, he's a young 55, or he's an old 45. Well, I mean, Huggins is an old 69.
Is that what I was just about to look up.
There are. I mean, how old is Nick Saban? Nick Saban is younger than that, or older than that. I think.
I think Saban's early. I think he is.
Yeah,
70.
Saban's 71.
Yeah,
Saban looks like he could run circles around Bob Huggins.
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah, well, I agree. And just from that, I was surprised when I heard that Saban was 70, and the two look miles apart in terms of. And again, there's a certain amount of that's got to be conveyed in recruiting. You go, man, if I really like Coach Huggins, but my goodness, is he going to be here?
He needs a stool.
Well,
Saban
I know.
Doesn't.
That's it. And that's been a thing. That's been a reality for a while. And he's really big. I'm not dogging on him for his weight, but that can't help the back. And I mean, just the whole thing. You're like, man, now I realize in the portal, you can, go give it a shot there. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. And that works. But man, I'm with you. It's almost like the next AD's tenure. And I'd be curious to know what an administration thinks about. We want 10 years, good years out of this athletic director. If you think you're only going to hire him for 3 or 4 years, then you want somebody who's going to make these two hires, and that'll be
this in the Yates Flooring Center chat line. I was surprised that Huggins didn't retire after last year, he just seemed disinterested. Yeah, I mean, part of me wonder, this is not the college basketball that, that he spent most of his career coaching in, right? With the transfer portal, with NIL, with all that stuff. He's very old school. I mean, there are some coaches that have, no matter their feelings, have adapted, right, to this new era. Nick Saban is one of them, right? I don't think Huggins is just super excited about adapting to NIL and transfer portal.
No, I'm with you, and in that regard, I think it is a lot like Coach Knight, Bob Knight. Not that we're talking NIL, but just where at the very end, it's like the kids are very, very different than his peak tenure.
You've been listening to the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3. Check out DoubleT973.com for more from Lubbock Sports Station.